for Global Business Update. Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, everybody. Sea of red, really, facing investors today after the sell-off on Wall Street last night. China stocks, actually, and Hong Kong stocks too, not doing very well this morning. Now, President Xi in China gets an unprecedented third term after the party's Congress over the weekend. Now, you may not think this is a lot, but this is absolutely unprecedented. This takes his length of office to the sort of levels of Chairman Mao all those years ago. So the Communist Party will have a firm grip on the economy. Where it's going, well, that's very interesting, really, isn't it? Because over the last weekend, they were talking about a 5% growth target in China, which is below what a lot of people were expecting. So again, a lot of the world actually looking at China as it would, because whatever you think about it, it is the world's second largest economy, and its progress tends to drag everything else with it or not. As far as the outgoing Bank of Japan governor is concerned, now this is quite important. This is Kuroda. This is Haruhiko Kuroda, and what was interesting about him is that the Bank of Japan did nothing overnight, 0.1% negative rates, minus 0.1%. He's defending that, saying that the consumer needs to be effectively protected within Japan. That's where he feels the growth is going to come from. This is a country obviously very, very dependent upon the cost of imports, which are rising as inflation goes around the world. Anyway, that's his, and he's replaced by Kazuo Ueda. No indications that he's going to change government policy or indeed Bank of Japan policy in Japan right now, but we will wait to see. If you remember, I'm sure I don't need to tell you, but they have not been joining in with the general narrative of central banks, which has been to be raising interest rates and so on. They've kept theirs negative at 0.1%. Sri Lanka, yes. Now, we've talked about Sri Lanka a lot, haven't we? What it needs, according to investors there, is a complete change at the top. The same problems, according to investors, will continue within Sri Lanka. And remember that what Sri Lanka is doing is actually trying to get its hands on this $2.9 billion IMF grant, and it won't get that until it puts its economy in shape. And investors are saying what you need to do is change the institutions. Institutional, if not existential change, is necessary in Sri Lanka before it gets that kind of money. If you remember, the previous Prime Minister last year, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, fled and resigned once abroad, and he was replaced by somebody who has been Prime Minister 6 times. So basically what investors are saying is change the people at the top, and then maybe we can talk about economic development in that country. Let me take you to the United States. Big sell-off yesterday. Now, here's the funny thing. So the stocks actually liked the fact that the jobless claims went up. In other words, the labour market was softening, which tends to mean that inflation is actually falling because it means less demand and so on. Now, it's all looking towards the jobs figures out, the big ones, the big monthly ones, out at our lunchtime, the United States breakfast time today. And if they're very, very strong, figures, then the markets won't like that, because they'll feel as though interest rates have got to rise higher to cope with demand and therefore inflation. And so yesterday, it was a big dumping of financial shares and bank shares and so on in the United States. I can point you to the figures if you're interested. $52 billion wiped off financials like JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citi, and also Wells Fargo yesterday. Now, the EU is following as well. Not one country within the EU, the Netherlands. Now, fairly small country, but a very, very important country as far as semiconductors are concerned. Because what it does is it's got a company there which actually produces semiconductors for use, and the worrying about whether or not China gets its hands on these and actually starts to all that starts to become a security problem for the Netherlands. So the Netherlands, one of the smallest states within the EU is nevertheless very much joining in with the United States clampdown on semiconductors. As far as the UK is concerned, HS2, the high-speed rail link, that's now been delayed for 2 years. It's very controversial, and it's been delayed because inflation is causing infrastructure costs and building costs to rise. And this is, these public things that the UK is not very good at because the taxes presumably aren't high enough, but it was 2 years ago, it was going to be £10 billion. 10 years ago, it's going to be £10 billion. In that decade, the costs have risen to £71 billion. So that doesn't look to me like either value for money or cost control, and it's being delayed for another 2 years, at least one of the links is, so that the cost can be spread over a longer period. So that's still quite a long way away. Where actually faster trains go, if they're shaving 10 minutes off a journey, what is the point of that? A lot of people are saying, when you can actually have computer Zoom meetings and all the rest of it, or WebEx like we do here, and do that on your computer rather than riding on a train. And what difference does 5 or 10 minutes make to a particular journey? The OECD is noting that despite the illegal migrants problems within the UK, the legal search for talent is taking the country right up the list of those which are giving talent a good place within the UK. And the UK itself has avoided, it looks like, recession. Growth was 0.3% in January, very much against what people had expected. So it looks like the UK may well be avoiding recession as we travel through 2023. And finally, oil. Now, again, this kind of thing about, what do we want? Do we want a soft labour market, which means that interest rates less likely to rise, or do we want interest rates combating inflation, therefore maybe causing a slight recession in countries, less demand for oil? The oil market's battling with those sort of conundrums. It'll be fairly interesting to see what the jobs figures actually have effect on the oil market. But as far as equities are concerned, if those figures are strong, equities will go down once again. That is the global view this morning.
Good morning, Michael. Isn't it hypocritical what the UK is doing as regards this migrant crisis? You're pushing away migrants, but you want people to do the jobs that you will not get migrants to do any longer because you've pushed them out with Brexit. You had an HPV drivers crisis. No people to drive the trucks from place to place. You had to get the military in. But people want to come into your country, you're pushing them out. And now you have made Gary Lineker, which is a football hero, the scapegoat in all of this, because he made an allusion to what happened in Nazi Germany. Can we dial back historically and remind the UK that it was the same UK government under Winston Churchill that said over 8 million or 3 million people in Bengal, in India, can go and die by not giving them food aids? So what is this hypocrisy we're seeing here by the UK? You want somebody at the same time, but you don't want these people in? What is happening?
Don't drag me into the Gary Lineker business, because that's, he's a very good football commentator and was a great footballer. I'll leave it at that. As far as immigrants are concerned, what the government is trying to do is to stop illegal immigration, illegal migrants, and the people who trade in those, to try to break that business model. But the OECD, the Paris, remember, this is the Paris-based OECD, that's all I'm reporting, was saying this morning that as far as skilled immigration is concerned, the UK is rising up the list of acceptance. So it's nothing to do with football commentators, nothing to do with people trafficking, illegal migrants, illegal immigrants. This is to do with people actually coming to the country, just like all sorts of countries do. They welcome skilled workers. That's all the OECD is saying. But I do point out it is the Paris-based OECD. And I don't need to remind you that if the Paris-based OECD, whatever you think about it, is saying something complimentary to the UK, then we sort of will take that. Thank you very much.
All right, still further on migration and the labour gap particularly in the construction industry in the UK. So as you mentioned, the figures for January was released, 0.3% growth, as opposed to what some analysts had looked at, perhaps 0.1% or perhaps no growth at all as experienced in the last 3 months. However, whilst they said the services industry, including education, contributed to the GDP growth, the construction industry saw a decline, a contraction, 1.7% less in the construction industry. Now, the new immigration laws are expanding to allow more workers into a construction industry that's seen an over 40% decline in labor in that sector, thereby affecting, building plans by this current administration. I'd like you to just break down a bit further in terms of what the plans, the government plans to attract more talent into the construction industry, since there's a gap that needs to be filled.
Yesterday it was announced, wasn't it? I brought this to you about the government actually loosening the rules. They're starting with the construction industry because they recognise there's been a labour shortage there, and they'll see how that works out, and then, as I understand it, and then expand it to other sectors as well. But once again, back to these figures. This is skilled migrants coming into the country. People come to the country with a working skill. This is not illegal migrants turning up, coming across the channel. This is actually people coming through recognised channels, getting visas and getting a skilled import of workers. We have, as far as the UK is concerned, as you will well know, we have done this for hundreds upon hundreds of years. For better or worse, we've taken skilled people into the country, and they've found a place within an administration and within a population that is generally very, very tolerant. And the OECD also noted that as far as the population of the UK is concerned, against illegal migrants, but very much for skilled immigration, and that really, I think, says a lot about the kind of jobs that people want to come into this country and actually do, provided, of course, that they assimilate into the general population. Why would you not want that?
Well, Michael, two quick brief things as we try to manage time. The first one, Sri Lanka. Yes, IMF is going to give executive board approval, we're told, on March 20. Now that there are concrete assurances from Sri Lanka's creditors, particularly China Exim Bank and also India. But what is the guarantee that this would quicken the process or solve, or meet the expectations of Sri Lanka? Are we likely to have the kind of situation we have with Zambia, where there's a stalemate, more or less with regard to conditionalities and also debt restructuring? So executive board meeting approval by IMF, what guarantee in real terms does it give? In Japan, yes, Kuroda has been very consistent. Interest rate negative minus 0.1%. The yield curve cap is around 0%. And UEDA has been confirmed by Parliament, paving the way for its formal announcement by government. But UEDA says it will still maintain this ultra-loose style. But the question I want to ask is, what is the guarantee in this regard that tweaking monetary policy, as the Federal Reserve of the U.S. continues to do, will guarantee that the economy will recover? 8 interest rate hikes in 1 year by Powell and his team, and yet the economy is not anywhere looking positive. Could there be other tools that people will say, oh, the orthodoxy is just increase rates? Are there other tools that could be considered?
I would question, you keep using this word guarantee. I'm not quite sure what kind of world you think provides guarantees. You get guarantees on a new car sometimes when they say you do 100,000 miles and we'll service that 3 times within that. And that's what I would call a guarantee. Guarantee as far as Sri Lanka is concerned? No, of course not. What I was reflecting this morning were investors saying, do you know what? The same old thing will happen again unless there is a change at the top. And the IMF and the IMF are no doubt noting this. I don't think that necessarily any guarantee from China or India it should not be swaying the IMF, because if the IMF is swayed by those kind of things, who's to say what the motives, not the guarantees, but the motives of China and what the motives of India are getting involved in Sri Lanka? And Sri Lanka itself has said that the amount of money that the IMF stroke World Bank wants to put into the country is not nearly enough. Well, all investors are saying is it's the same old crew at the top, and until you change the same old crew, the same old problems will happen. Why wouldn't they? Because an autocratic party in power will always react like that. As far as Japan's concerned, again, I would go back to what I was saying a few days ago. I personally find it rather odd that Japan and Ueda would continue with this dovish policy, which can only be reflected against the consumers within the country, and that's where the growth is going to come from. I personally, good luck to them. If that's how they see it, I would have thought that as the third largest economy in the world, Japan really needs to start to stand up for itself and start to show that it's joining in with the general central bank. I am mystified how an ultra dovish policy actually works there, in the same way that I'm mystified that if you lower interest rates in Turkey, it's somehow seen to be good for the population, given that inflation is 60% in that country right now, year on year. So what you're asking, I don't know what I think's happening. I think what I hope is happening in Japan is that behind the scenes, a soft landing is being prepared, in the same way that the United States is not continually saying we're going to raise interest rates to an extremely high level. Again, yesterday, I was talking about BlackRock, wasn't I? Saying that they think that interest rates will be 6% in the United States by the end of the year. It's a continual guessing game. All you hope is that sense is actually being applied behind the scenes. Guarantees don't exist.
Well, change at the top. They tried it in Pakistan. Investors and the IMF tried it in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Although IMF will say it's innocent, but that has not moved Pakistan any further. Anyway, thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much indeed. Now for business updates across the African continent, Rutu Sudiri joins us.
Good morning, all. Hope you all doing well. Hope you had breakfast with some sugar in it. We're talking sugar this morning. You don't have sugar because of health stuff, right?
Yeah,
I tend to use honey myself, but sugar is very integral to Nigeria. Oh yeah.
Some people say there's more sugar in
the honey. Yeah, good point, doctor. So we had Ravindra Singhvi, who is the CEO, Group MD, and Group CEO of Dangote Sugar. Exclusive chat with him yesterday, where we talked about their full year financials for 2022. And importantly, the Nigeria Sugar Master Plan. Let's just quickly jump through some of the numbers. So Dangote Sugar Refinery PLC, impressive numbers for full year 2022 despite challenges. Your revenues up 46%, 403 billion naira. Cost of sales did jump as well, 37%, 311. Gross profit, you subtract the cost of sales from revenue, you get your gross profit, 83% jump. Profit after tax, look at that, 148% climb, 54 billion. You look at their revenue segments, and where most of it came from was their 50 kilogram bags of sugar. That jumped 45%. It contributed 97% to their revenues. Retail sugar, molasses, freight income, the additional there, but it was mainly the 50 kg bags of sugar. Volumes increased, some price increases there as well. Regions, very interesting. Lagos is so big that Lagos is its own region. So the north, though, contributed the most of their revenue, 178 billion. Lagos came second, 173. Then you've got the Western Nigeria, 34 billion, and Eastern Nigeria, 16. Very interesting about this regional thing. Apple, just to jump to global news very quickly. Apple, and there's news that Apple wants to make India its own region when it comes to reporting their sales numbers, which is to show you how important and how wealth is climbing in India to where the average Indian is able to afford more expensive Apple products, and Apple is looking at making them their own region. So basically that shows you how much Lagos means to all these firms, to where Lagos is a massive part of Dangote Sugar's revenues. And then we go back to Dangote now. You look at the Nigeria Sugar Master Plan. This is why we talked about this. It kicked off in 2013. Now, this precedes the Buhari administration. This is into the Jonathan administration. But government is a continuum, right? We've had this for 10 years. It was just approved, Federal Executive Council, for the second phase, the second 10 years. And if you look at the objectives of the Nigeria Sugar Master Plan, what were the objectives? What did the government have in plans for us? self-sufficiency in sugar production, reduce sugar importation, create job opportunities. Every time they bring out these plans, they always tell you about the job opportunities and how many jobs they're going to create, and then generate electricity and ethanol. Now, I asked him about this. Listen to what he said.
Dangote is very committed for master plan.
Okay.
Right? In fact, before the start of the master plan, we had actually invested by acquisition of Savannah Sugar.
Yeah.
Even before the master plan was revealed and was come into effect in 2013. So before that, actually, we started a journey for the self-sufficiency of the sugar in Nigeria. And after the acquisition, now we have invested very heavily into the backward integration plan, almost about more than 100 billion naira.
Wow!
Yes.
100 billion?
Yeah, but we have our fair share of challenges.
Yes.
Right? The availability of the land, release of the land from the stakeholders, from the traditional holders of the land, infrastructure challenges. Last 2 years we have suffered, previously 2 years we have suffered on account of the corona, the port challenges, the security challenges, and also the foreign exchange.
Right.
So these are holding back our progress in backward sugar integration. But our hands are on deck. We are performing year on year much better on implementation of the sugar plan.
All right, so how well has the plan done? So this is the important part, right? We look at the numbers. Let's look at sugar data from 2013, when the master plan kicked off. Consumption, Nigerians were consuming about 1.37 million metric tons of sugar per year. Production, a paltry 5,000 metric tons. I mean, so, almost nothing. Importation, key, 1.374. So you're importing basically almost as much as you're consuming. Jump to 2019, right? A few years later, consumption has gone up, 1.4 million metric tons. Now production, it's gone up, 5,000 to 38,000. It's still small. Importation. Now, the last available data from the National Sugar Development Council was 2020 when COVID hit. They don't have any production data. I don't know why. They haven't updated it. But consumption is now up to 1.5 million metric tons. No production data available. But look at importation. It basically matches. I don't know if they're saying that we didn't produce any sugar because of the lockdowns or whatever. The point here is that while the president is defending who won the election, he hasn't said anything about sugar production. With all Dangote Sugar, you heard the CEO invested over 100 billion naira in trying to get backward integration together. And they're not the only player in this sector. There are other players here who have been trying to, Boa and all those other guys, right? So where are we? Where are we with I asked you three, where are we with sugar production?
I mean,
There's been no... Yeah, go ahead. That's it. That's what we're talking about today.
It just shows how appalling we think in this country. And you see, when we come out here to talk, people shout, oh, they're emotional, they're this. You see, what we just empirically do is to show you a country that could have been great, but keeps on missing its greatness because of its antecedent problem. Prior to this time, sugar is always a big deal.
Huge.
It is a gold mine. If Dangote, that has not even scratched the surface yet in sugar, can do close to 200 billion in sugar, sugar could be doing over 1 trillion.
Of course.
But where are all of our missed chances? Before Dangote, let's go back to the 60s. We tried setting up Basita Sugar. Did it work?
No.
You remember Tetanlaya?
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, this same Dangote, when he was about to start his factory, bought off Tetanlaya to be able to start. Did it work? No. What we keep seeing is the imports in the market. You remember how St. Louis dominated the market for cube sugar?
Yeah.
For all this while, it's because we didn't look inward. We've got great land for cane sugar. We've got great capacity for everything.
Yeah.
MQ of blessed memory had large farms in Lafayette and the likes. Before he passed, where part of the plant was going to involve this and all of that and sugar, we never saw the light of day.
Yeah.
But we have a plan on ground that if we truly follow, we can ramp up production. What's the problem? Be able to ramp up production of cane sugar. Because in this part, we don't really grow sugar with beets.
Right.
In some other parts, they use beets. Can we also adapt technology long run to grow beets here? All right?
Yeah.
To be able to get beet sugar out?
Yeah.
Can we also ramp up production in such a way that we can even meet our local market? See, if we do all of that and meet our local market and reduce the forex at which we are using to bring sugar in, sugar can be a 1 trillion naira industry.
But Rufai, we've lost 10 years.
We've lost 10 years, but you see, the good thing about life is this.
You have another chance.
No, it's not about another chance. The day you wake up, the time you wake up becomes your morning.
The morning show. All right.
That's it. So now that we have said this, if we can wake up today, our morning has started.
This is Tinubu's baby now.
Yes.
This is his problem. He has to produce it. This is his problem
over
now.
3 million jobs in sugar alone.
Well,
yes, absolutely. I mean,
the numbers are
the sugar master plan,
the numbers are
creation of jobs, and thank you so much for highlighting this and putting sugar on the table. It could have easily gone under the radar that we have now entered into the second phase of the National Sugar Master Plan and the revenue opportunities from sugar. But I just want to also bring on board as well what was one of the challenges of making this master plan work, which is the battle for supremacy amongst these big three. There was also constant, and in that way, stifling the success of the project. So this is the same thing that has plagued other master plans or other opportunities for revenue in Nigeria. Look at the oil sector, look at the different sector, agriculture sector. We have great plans on paper, but the execution is, we have a council, the National Sugar Development Council. They've been in operation for 10 years, gotten another 10 years now, but it is to really, look into these councils and also these organizations that benefit from it, who are benefiting at the expense of Nigeria. But like you mentioned, great potential, and I do hope that the second phase will be more successful than the first one.
Well, the problem with the sugar industry in Nigeria, in fact, dates back beyond 2013. The National Sugar Development Council of Nigeria was established in 2008. And it was that council that came up with the roadmap for sugar development in Nigeria. And what was the key thing in that master plan? The master plan was to ensure self-sufficiency in sugar production by the year maximum, 2010. But that did not happen. Hence the attempt to rejig the plan. Now, Nigeria was a late starter to the sugar struggle. We joined in 1960. Since 1960 up to now, in terms of local production, the only thing we've been able to do to push the needle was over the years to move from 2% domestic production to 3%. The rest of the percentage is imported.
Right.
So, and it's not just in sugar. The problem that you have with the production of sugar is the same in other sectors.
Pick anything
Oil and gas is the same. So we run an import-dependent economy. So that's what you find here again. However, what are the issues? Failure of policy. Government has always talked about backward integration. But as the same government, one government after the other, been able to create the enabling environment for that sugar sector? No. Right. And that was why all those earlier sugar factories, collapsed, disappeared. Is it not ironic that we are now at a point where we just look up to just a few, companies, private sector initiatives to save the country? Dangote in oil and gas. Right. All of you are waiting for Dangote refinery.
Yes.
Now it's a Dangote Sugar factory, and a few others who are playing in that sector. But has government done its own part in terms of tariffs, in terms of backward integration, in terms of enabling policies? The second part to look at is you started on the health ground, talking about diabetes and honey, and I said there's more sugar even in honey, as some researchers have pointed out. Today, one major issue coming out of the Northern Ireland Protocol deal between EU and the UK is that the EU is insisting that food items that are going to come from Northern Ireland into the European Union must meet a certain threshold, instead of content, instead of standards. Those standards are different from what they have in the UK. And the UK is saying, no, you can't dictate our own standards within the Union. But, the EU, you can hold on to your own. Okay, and all of this is about food items, the content. And sugar is listed as one of them.
Oh, yes.
That you cannot put certain things that could be carcinogenic in it. Is anybody even talking about the health dimension of it in Nigeria?
Right.
So we keep dropping the ball, but you have said, yes, it's a matter for the next administration to look into.
Indeed.
Thank you very much, Rotos.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rotos. Hope you have a sweet day.